The city was still sleepy and quiet when Jason Statham went out for his morning run. The streets were mostly empty, except for a few people waking up early or workers setting up their shops. The cool morning air filled his lungs as he ran at a steady pace, his feet making a soft sound on the pavement. Running was something he did every day. It helped him clear his mind before his busy day started. Jason had trained his body for many years. He was strong and fast, and every move he made was careful and smart. But right now he wasn't thinking about any of that. He was just a man enjoying a peaceful run before the city fully woke up. He didn't run too fast or too slow, just enough to feel good. As he neared the end of his run, he slowed down, taking deep breaths. Then he smelled something nice, fresh coffee. He looked around and saw a small cafe on the corner of the street. He had never been there before, but it looked warm and quiet. It seemed like a perfect place to sit and rest for a while. Jason walked inside and looked around. There were only a few people in the cafe. A young couple sat by the window, whispering to each other. An old man in the corner was reading a newspaper. Near the counter, a little girl, maybe 11 years old, was sitting with her school books open. She wore a neat school uniform, probably doing her homework before heading to school. Jason walked up to the counter and ordered a black coffee. He pulled his cap low over his face, not wanting anyone to notice him. He just wanted a quiet moment to himself. He found a seat at the back and took out his phone, checking his messages. He sat there, blending in with everyone else, just another person enjoying a cup of coffee. For a few minutes, everything was peaceful. But then he felt something. Someone was watching him. He glanced up and saw the little girl looking at him. She looked curious but unsure. She quickly looked down at her notebook when Jason noticed her. Her cheeks turned pink. Jason had seen this before. She probably thought she knew who he was but wasn't sure. He gave her a small smile and a nod, but she quickly looked away, too shy to say anything. A few minutes later, the girl finally gathered her courage. She stood up and walked toward him, holding her notebook tightly in her hands. Her voice was small and a little shaky. "Excuse me, sir. Are you Jason Statham?" she asked. Jason looked up from his phone. He tilted his cap slightly and gave her a little smirk. "Me? No, I'm just a guy who likes coffee. But if I were Jason Statham, I'd ask you to keep that a secret, all right?" he said. The girl giggled nervously, her eyes wide with excitement. She nodded quickly. "Okay," she whispered before hurrying back to her seat. Jason chuckled to himself. He liked moments like this. Even though he liked being alone, he appreciated his fans. But he thought that was the end of it. A few minutes later, the girl returned. This time she looked braver. She held out her notebook and a pen, her hands shaking a little. "If you're really not Jason Statham, that's okay," she said. "But if you are, can I please have your autograph?" Jason smiled at her determination. He took the notebook, turned to a blank page and signed his name. He even wrote a little message. "For the bravest girl I met today." He handed the notebook back to her. The girl's eyes widened in surprise and happiness. "Thank you," she said excitedly, hugging the notebook to her chest. Then she hesitated. "Can we take a picture too? Please?" Jason thought about it for a moment. Then he nodded. "All right, just one picture. But you have to promise me you won't tell anyone," he said. The girl beamed. She pulled out her phone and they took a quick photo together. She thanked him over and over before running back to her seat. She kept staring at her autograph like it was the most special thing in the world. Jason sipped his coffee, smiling. It was a nice way to start the morning. Everything was peaceful again. The cafe was filled with the quiet sounds of people talking, cups clinking, and soft music playing. The world outside was still waking up. Jason relaxed in his seat, enjoying the moment. Then the cafe door swung open with a loud creak. The whole mood in the cafe changed. 5 men walked in. They were big and tough-looking, wearing leather jackets with patches on them. Their heavy boots clomped on the floor. They had tattoos all over their arms. They were bikers, and the moment they entered, the cafe didn't feel so peaceful anymore. The young girl, still holding her notebook, froze in her seat. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked nervous. Jason didn't react. He just watched them through the reflection in the cafe window. The bikers looked around, their eyes scanning the room. Then one of them, a man with fiery red hair, nudged his friend and pointed at Jason. "Hey, isn't that the big movie star? The one who thinks he's the toughest guy around?" the red-haired man said loudly. The other bikers laughed. Jason kept his face calm. He didn't want any trouble. He took another sip of his coffee, pretending not to hear them. A tall, muscular biker stepped closer. He sneered. Well, he said. "Look who we have here. Big tough fighter, huh? Bet you think you're a real hero." Jason set his coffee cup down slowly. He looked up at them, his voice steady and cool. "I'm just here to enjoy my coffee. No trouble." But the trouble had already found him. The bikers surrounded his table, laughing loudly and making fun of him. Their leader, a man with a skull tattoo on his neck, leaned in close. His voice was mocking. "What's the matter, Statham? You're not so tough without your cameras and stunt doubles, huh?" Before Jason could say anything, a small but strong voice interrupted. "Leave him alone." The young girl had stood up. She was still holding her notebook tightly, her face serious. Even though she was scared, she didn't back down. The bikers turned to her, laughing even more. A skinny man with a scar on his cheek smirked. "Look at this little fangirl," he said, "trying to protect her hero. That's cute." Another biker, a big burly man, reached for Jason's coffee cup. He grabbed it, then tilted it forward. The hot coffee spilled onto the girl's school uniform. Her notebook slipped from her hands and landed in the puddle of coffee. She gasped. Her eyes filled with tears, not from the heat, but from the sight of her ruined autograph. "Oops," the red-haired biker said mockingly. "Guess you should have kept your mouth shut, kid." The cafe fell silent. The air felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Jason took a deep breath and let it out slowly. His calm face changed. He stood up, his sharp eyes looking straight at the red-haired biker. "That's enough," he said. The room went silent. Everyone held their breath. The bikers looked at each other. Their confident smile started to fade. Then the leader, a man with a skull tattoo on his neck, smirked. "Oh yeah? And what are you going to do about it?" Jason didn't answer right away. He reached down and picked up the girl's ruined notebook carefully. He placed it on a dry part of the table. Then he turned to face the bikers completely. The air in the cafe changed. It felt heavy, like a storm was about to come. The cafe had been filled with the soft sounds of morning, people talking, cups clinking, the smell of coffee. But now it was silent. The tension in the air was thick. 5 bikers stood around Jason's table. They were big, rough men making the space feel small. The young girl stood frozen nearby. Her uniform was stained with coffee. Her hands shook, and her lip trembled as she looked at her ruined notebook. The bikers laughed, their cruel voices filling the small cafe. Other customers shrank back in their seats, afraid. Jason didn't move. His eyes stayed on the red-haired biker, the one who had spilled the coffee. Jason looked relaxed. His shoulders were loose. But something in him had changed. A trained fighter would see it, the shift from calm to ready. The bikers, however, didn't understand. They thought he was hesitating. The leader, the one with the skull tattoo, stepped forward. His smirk grew wider. "What's wrong, movie star? Upset about your little fan?" His voice was full of mockery, daring Jason to do something. Jason took another slow breath. His fingers brushed the edge of the soaked notebook before setting it down. His movements were careful and calm. His body told him one thing: this would not end with words. The bikers weren't here to talk. They had come looking for trouble, and now they thought they had found the right person to mess with. The young girl swallowed hard. Her small fists clenched at her sides. "You're just bullies," she said. Her voice was small but firm. The red-haired biker laughed. "Bullies? Sweetheart, this is just a little fun." He turned back to Jason. His expression darkened. "But you don't seem like you're having fun." Jason tilted his head slightly, his eyes steady. "I don't like wasting time." The leader chuckled. "That's funny. Neither do we." It happened fast. The red-haired biker swung his fist, aiming right at Jason's face. It was a wild, strong punch. But Jason had already moved. He shifted to the side just enough to let the punch miss him. At the same time, Jason's elbow shot forward, hitting the biker hard in the ribs. The biker let out a painful grunt. Before the biker could react, Jason struck again. This time, his fist connected with the biker's jaw. The man stumbled backward, crashing into a table. Chairs fell over as he hit the ground. The cafe burst into chaos. The second biker, a muscular man covered in tattoos, grabbed a chair. He lifted it high, ready to smash it down on Jason's head. But Jason was faster. He stepped forward before the chair could come down. He kicked the man's knee hard. There was a loud pop and the biker collapsed, screaming in pain. The leader, the one with the skull tattoo, reacted next. He pulled a metal chain from his belt and swung it in a wide arc. The chain sliced through the air with a sharp whistle. Jason didn't step back. He stepped forward. His hand caught the chain in midair. With one quick movement, he yanked it, pulling the leader off balance. Then Jason slammed his elbow into the man's chest, knocking the air out of him. A final punch to the jaw sent him stumbling. The last two bikers hesitated. One, a skinny man with a scar on his cheek, cursed under his breath. "Son of a..." He rushed forward, swinging a fist. Jason waited until the last second. Then he sidestepped. The biker ran past him off balance. Jason gave him a small push. The biker's own speed sent him crashing into the counter. Cups and plates shattered around him. The final biker, a big man with a thick beard, grabbed a glass bottle. His grip was tight. His knuckles were white with anger. "You think you're tough?" he snarled. Jason shook his head. His voice was calm. "Don't." The biker didn't listen. He swung the bottle. Jason moved. His hand shot up, grabbing the biker's wrist. He twisted. The bottle slipped from the biker's hand and shattered on the floor. Jason didn't give him time to recover. A sharp strike to the throat made the biker gasp. Then Jason kneed him in the stomach. The biker fell back, groaning. Then silence. The cafe was a mess. Tables and chairs were knocked over. Broken glass covered the floor. The smell of spilled coffee filled the air. The bikers lay on the ground, moaning in pain. Some clutched their ribs. Others barely moved. Jason exhaled and rolled his shoulders. His heartbeat hadn't even gone up. The young girl was still standing. Her wide eyes darted between Jason and the defeated bikers. She looked down at her ruined notebook, then back at Jason. "That was..." She trailed off, struggling to find the right word. Jason looked at her. "You okay?" She nodded quickly. "Yeah, that was amazing." The other customers slowly began to move. Whispers filled the cafe. Some people were amazed. Others were in shock. A few pulled out their phones, recording what had happened. The cafe manager, a middle-aged woman, stepped forward. Her hands shook as she looked at the damage. I don't even know what to say." Jason nodded. "I'm just glad no one got hurt." But it wasn't over. A sound broke the silence, the distant wail of police sirens. The bikers stirred at the noise. Their leader, still holding his bruised jaw, glared at Jason with hate-filled eyes. "This isn't over," he spat. Jason met his gaze, unshaken. "Oh, it is." The police stormed in. Officers looked around, taking in the scene. They quickly restrained the groaning bikers. One officer walked up to Jason. His face was serious. "Mr. Statham, do you want to press charges?" Jason looked at the beaten men. Then he shook his head. "No need. They already got what they deserved." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "Understood. We'll take it from here." The bikers were dragged to their feet. They moved slowly, still in pain. As they were let out, the leader shot one last glare at Jason. "You'll pay for this." Jason tilted his head. "You already did." The young girl watched as the last of the bikers was taken away. She looked down at her ruined notebook, her fingers loosening their grip. Jason turned to her and crouched down so they were eye level. "You did good," he told her. She frowned. "I didn't do anything." Jason shook his head. "You stood up to them. That takes more courage than you think." She bit her lip and looked at her notebook. Jason reached into his bag and pulled out a new one. He flipped to the first page, wrote something down, and handed it to her. It read, "For the bravest person in the room." Her eyes widened. Her face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Statham." Jason smiled. "Call me Jason." Jason was all alone. No friends to help him. No cameras watching. Just him and the bad guys. One of the bikers, a skinny man with a chain, attacked first. He swung the chain fast, trying to hit Jason in the stomach. But Jason waited, staying still. At the very last second, he moved, quick as lightning. His hand shot out and grabbed the chain in midair. The biker's eyes went wide. Before he could do anything, Jason yanked the chain hard, pulling the man forward. Then, Jason's knee smashed into the biker's ribs. The biker gasped and fell to the ground, clutching his side. The chain slipped from his fingers and Jason let it fall with a clatter. The second biker was big and strong with fists like hammers. He ran at Jason, swinging wildly. Jason ducked the first punch. The second came fast, but Jason was even faster. He blocked it with his arm, then, whack! He slammed his elbow into the biker's jaw. The big man staggered back, growling in anger. He reached for something strapped to his motorcycle, a crowbar. Jason's sharp eyes spotted it right away. He knew what it meant. When someone grabbed a weapon, it meant they were desperate. The biker lifted the crowbar high and swung it down, trying to hit Jason's ribs. But Jason grabbed a trash can lid and lifted it just in time. The crowbar hit the lid with a loud clang. The biker's arms shook from the impact. Jason didn't waste a second. He shoved the lid forward, knocking the man off balance. Then he kicked him hard right in the chest. The biker went flying backward, crashing against his own motorcycle. The bike tipped over with a loud bang. Just then, another biker sped toward Jason on his motorcycle, trying to ram him down. Jason stood still, waiting. At the very last moment, he stepped aside. In the same motion, he picked up a metal pipe from the ground and swung it low. The pipe hit the front wheel of the motorcycle. Wham! The bike flipped forward and the biker was thrown over the handlebars. He hit the ground with a painful thud, rolling onto his side, groaning in pain. The last biker skidded his motorcycle to a stop. He didn't rush in like the others. He had a knife. A long, sharp one. The blade glinted in the morning light. He pointed it at Jason, his face twisted with anger. "You think you're tough?" he sneered. "Without your fancy moves, you're just an old man." Jason sighed, shaking his head. "You guys never learn." The biker lunged, swinging his knife toward Jason's stomach. But Jason caught his wrist in midair. With a quick twist, clang, the knife dropped to the ground. Jason punched the biker in the stomach, grabbed his collar and threw him backward. The man hit the ground hard, groaning. Now everything was quiet. The 4 bikers were down. The street, once empty, now had people watching from a safe distance. Some held up their phones, recording everything. Jason took a deep breath and rolled his shoulders. The big biker, still holding his ribs, glared up at Jason. "You'll regret this," he growled. Jason stepped closer, looking down at him. His voice was calm. "I already do." The biker flinched. He knew he had lost. Slowly he got up, helping the skinny biker to his feet. The others groaned as they stood. The fight was over and they knew it. Jason adjusted his cap and said, "Now walk away." They hesitated, but then they saw the crowd, the cameras, the proof that they had been beaten. The big biker spat on the ground, his hands shaking with fury. But he didn't say another word. One by one they limped to their motorcycles. Engines roared, and in moments they were gone, disappearing down the street like a storm passing by. Jason exhaled, letting his body relax. He looked at the crowd. Some people whispered. A young man walked up, still holding his phone, his face full of awe. "That was amazing," he said. "You're like a real-life action hero." Jason gave him a small smile. "Just a guy doing the right thing." The young man nodded, still shocked. Jason glanced down at his hands. No cuts, no bruises. He had handled the fight well, like always. But something still didn't feel right. His phone buzzed. A message from his assistant. A reminder about a meeting. Jason sighed, slipping the phone back into his pocket. There was always something else to do. As he walked down the street, the fight felt like a memory, but he knew the bikers wouldn't forget. This wasn't over. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing louder. The first police car screeched to a stop, then another, then a third. Officers jumped out, hands resting on their belts, eyes scanning the scene. They saw the knocked-over motorcycles, the cracked pavement, and the people still watching. One officer, tall with sharp eyes, looked at Jason and frowned. "Mr. Statham," he said. "Mind telling me what happened here?" Jason met his gaze, his face calm. "Just a little misunderstanding." The officer narrowed his eyes. "A misunderstanding that left 4 men on the ground?" Jason shrugged. "They made a bad choice." Another officer spoke to a woman in the crowd who had recorded everything. She nervously showed the officer her phone. He watched for a moment, then looked back at Jason. The crowd shifted, waiting to see what would happen. Jason had fought like in his movies, but this was real life. More police cars arrived. The bikers who had tried to run away were now in handcuffs, their faces bruised. The big one still held his ribs, his eyes full of hate. The lead officer turned to Jason. "You want to press charges?" Jason didn't even think about it. No need. They already got what they deserved. The officers exchanged looks, surprised. But the lead officer nodded. Understood. The bikers were dragged to the police cars. The leader, a man with a skull tattoo, glared at Jason. "You'll pay for this," he muttered. Jason tilted his head. "You already did." The biker spat, but Jason was already walking away. A girl from the cafe holding a small notebook watched everything. Jason caught her eye and nodded. She hesitated, then smiled. The cafe manager stepped up, wringing her hands. "Mr. Statham, I don't even know what to say. That was..." She glanced at the broken tables and glass. Jason smirked. "Didn't mean to ruin your morning rush." She let out a nervous laugh. "I think you just made it more interesting." The crowd started to break up. A young officer stepped forward, looking nervous. I've seen all your movies." He glanced at his boss, then back at Jason. "That was the best fight I've ever seen." Jason just shrugged. "Experience." The last of the bikers were shoved into police cars. The officer turned back to Jason. "You don't need me to say this, but..." He paused. Jason finished the sentence. "Try not to wreck cafes." The officer smirked. "Something like that." Jason turned to the girl again. She was still holding her notebook. He crouched down to her level. "You were brave." She frowned. "I didn't do anything." Jason shook his head. "Standing up takes courage." She bit her lip. Jason pulled out a fresh notebook, scribbled something and handed it to her. "For the bravest person in the room." Her eyes widened. "Thank you, Mr. Statham." Jason smiled. "Call me Jason." As he left the cafe, the sun shone bright. But deep inside he knew this wasn't over. The city moved around him, people lost in their own worlds. But Jason stayed sharp. He could feel it. Trouble wasn't done yet. Jason turned a corner onto a quieter street. It was a shortcut he had taken before. The alley he entered was narrow, with old brick walls. Most people ignored it, but Jason never ignored places like this. They were either a way out or a trap. As he walked, he looked at a store window. He saw two men behind him, following. They kept their distance but didn't stop. Jason kept walking normally, making it seem like he didn't notice. But inside he was already planning. He heard the low sound of motorcycles nearby. The bikers were waiting for him to step away from the public. They were patient, but so was Jason. Jason turned into the alley, walking calmly. But he was listening closely. He could hear footsteps behind him, the way the air moved when someone got closer. He let them think they had him. When he reached the middle of the alley, he stopped. The sounds of the city seemed far away. The two men stepped in behind him. One was skinny with tattoos on his arms. The other was big with a thick beard. Jason had seen them earlier. They weren't smiling now. This wasn't a game anymore. Jason didn't turn around. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked. The skinny man laughed and pulled a metal chain from his belt, letting it hang. "Oh, we're sure," he said. The big man cracked his knuckles. "You made us look stupid." Jason finally turned. His eyes were calm, his body relaxed. "You did that to yourselves," he said. The big man's face turned red with anger. He took a step forward. But before he could do anything, Jason heard the motorcycles. Their engines rumbled at the far end of the alley. Two more bikers appeared, blocking the exit. These were the same men who had tried to hit him with their bikes earlier. Now they had him trapped. Jason sighed and rolled his shoulders. Some people never learn. The skinny man moved first, swinging his chain at Jason's head. Jason stepped to the side, catching the chain in his hand. He pulled hard, making the man lose balance. Then Jason elbowed him in the face, sending him stumbling back. Jason didn't stop. He wrapped the chain around his arm and punched the skinny man in the ribs. The man crashed into the alley wall and groaned in pain. The big man roared and charged, swinging a heavy punch. Jason moved aside smoothly. The big man's own strength made him stumble forward. Jason kicked the back of his knee, making him drop down. Before he could get up, Jason grabbed his head and slammed it against the brick wall. The man groaned and slumped to the ground. The two bikers on motorcycles revved their engines and came straight at Jason. He had only seconds to react. He ran toward the first one. At the last moment, he grabbed a metal trash can lid and swung it into the bike's front wheel. The bike twisted out of control and the rider flew off, rolling across the ground. The last biker realized too late that he was alone. He reached for a knife on his belt. Jason shook his head. "Don't," he warned. The biker lunged anyway, swinging the knife toward Jason's chest. Jason caught his wrist and twisted it sharply. The knife dropped to the ground. Using the biker's own movement against him, Jason flipped him over his shoulder. The man landed on his back, gasping for air. The alley was silent now. Jason stood, adjusting his jacket. Four bikers lay on the ground, groaning. None of them were getting up soon. The big man, still dazed, spat blood and glared at Jason. "You think this is over?" he asked. Jason crouched in front of him. His face was calm, but his voice was firm. "It is for you." The big man flinched. Jason stood up, hearing sirens in the distance. Someone had called the police. He didn't wait around. He stepped over the bikers and walked out of the alley. When Jason reached the main road, the city moved on as if nothing had happened. People walked past, unaware of the fight that had just taken place. Jason took out his phone. His knuckles were clean, no cuts, no bruises. As always, he was quick and efficient. A message from his assistant popped up. He had a meeting soon. Life never stopped. He put his phone away but glanced back toward the alley. The bikers wouldn't come after him again. Not today. Maybe not ever. But Jason knew people like them. They didn't forget. They didn't let things go. He didn't need to turn around to know they were already planning to come back. This time they wouldn't attack him one by one. They would come all at once, ready to finish what they started. Jason adjusted his cap, hands in his pockets. He listened. The low rumble of engines came from behind him. They were near but not on the main road. They were waiting. He kept walking at the same pace, calm and steady. He didn't need to hurry. They were about to make another mistake. He turned down a street with fewer people. They followed. He could hear the engines getting louder. He didn't change his speed. Instead, he stepped into a side street, open enough for him to move freely. The moment he did, the bikers roared forward. The first one sped toward him, gripping the handlebars tightly. Jason didn't move until the last second. Then he stepped aside, grabbing the biker's arm as he passed. With a sharp twist, Jason pulled him off the bike. The man tumbled onto the pavement. His motorcycle crashed into a parked car with a loud crunch. The second biker swung a chain at Jason like a whip. Jason ducked, the chain slicing through the air just above his head. Before the man could attack again, Jason grabbed his wrist and twisted. The chain fell to the ground. Jason struck him twice, once in the ribs, once in the jaw. The biker collapsed onto the pavement. The big man charged next, fists swinging like hammers. Jason let the first punch go past him, stepping closer instead. A knee to the stomach knocked the wind out of the biker. Before he could recover, Jason hit him hard in the side of the head. The man staggered, dizzy. The last biker was different. He moved carefully, holding a sharp knife. He was experienced. Jason watched him closely, adjusting his stance. The biker lunged. Jason blocked the attack, redirecting the knife just enough. Then in one quick move, he grabbed the biker's wrist and twisted. The knife dropped. Jason kicked the man's leg, throwing him off balance, and finished with a strong punch to the jaw. The man crumpled to the ground. It was over. Jason exhaled and rolled his shoulders. The street was quiet again. A few people watched from a distance, too scared to step in. Jason glanced at the four men lying on the ground. None of them would be getting up anytime soon. The big man, still holding his ribs, glared at Jason. "You'll regret this," he muttered. Jason crouched slightly, his face calm. "I already do." The biker flinched. He knew he had lost. The fight had been quick. Jason stood up, fixing his jacket. "Now walk away." The bikers hesitated, but they had no choice. They saw the onlookers, the phone cameras recording. Their defeat was clear. One by one, they dragged themselves up, limping to their motorcycles. The big man spat on the ground, furious but silent. Within moments, they were gone, engines roaring as they disappeared down the street. Jason took a slow breath. The fight is over for now. He turned back toward the city. As he walked, his phone buzzed. Another reminder. Another meeting. Life never stopped. He looked back once more. The fight was over. But he knew their type. This wouldn't be the last time. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more exciting stories filled with adventure, mystery, and unforgettable moments. Your support means the world. It keeps these stories coming and the creativity flowing. Thanks for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.